Hey guys, so I got my Spider-Man suit today and I thought it'd be the perfect time to actually do my review for Spider-Man No Way Home. This is going to be the spoiler review for the movie because I did my no spoiler review a few days ago. That's already posted. I think it's actually the thumbnail for my channel. So if you want to check that out for the people who haven't watched the movie yet, go check that out. Also, I have a special guest with me today, my dog. Oh. Never mind. I had a special guest with me today, but she just didn't want me in the camera, I guess. Okay, I just grabbed my AirPods just because it's better sound quality compared to the echo of just having nothing. Without any more wait, I do want to get started right away with the review for Spider-Man No Way Home. I want to talk about first about what I liked, what I loved, what I laughed about in the movie, what I enjoyed, what I disliked, what I hated, what I didn't understand, what I thought there should have been more of, what I thought there should have been less of. Just more or less just the entire movie. I'm going to keep it as clear and concise as I possibly can though for you guys. But first, I want to talk about the pacing. Now the movie was already 2 hours and 30 minutes approximately. That's a pretty long movie. I want to talk about how that being said, about how long of a movie it was, I feel like the pacing was really rushed, especially in the first half of the movie. I'm going to separate this movie in two acts, with the first act being before they meet the Spider-Man and the last act after they meet all the Peter Parkers, just to make it easier for you to understand where I'm coming from. So in the first half, it was very convoluted, confusing, and kind of didn't make sense at some points because the movie had the whole setting from Far From Home that Peter Parker was a murderer and that these charges were huge and that he's public enemy #1. And then immediately around maybe not even 20 minutes in the movie, they introduced Daredevil, which I thought was amazing. Let me just go on a side note right there. Daredevil being introduced to the MCU is fantastic. I like the way they introduced him into the MCU in the movie, but I feel like his scenes were way too short, and that's where that ties into the whole part where it was rushed. On how the entire first part of the movie is him being charged for these murders, and how it was hyped up for Far From Home ending and the beginning of No Way Home, only for it to be dropped really fast because of how good of a lawyer Matt Murdock is. Of course, don't get me wrong, I watched Daredevil, love Daredevil, and I know he's a really good lawyer, but they didn't dive deep into it at all. They kind of just hyped up the whole, oh my god, he's a murderer, and then out of nowhere the charges were dropped. And they didn't have much screen time with Matt Murdock to begin with, and the conversations he did have with the main characters was really useless. He kept saying, you need a good lawyer to happy this, that to happy, and Happy kept making jokes. It was more like another comic relief part of the movie, when in reality it should have been really serious. This guy's getting charged for murders and executions and betrayals and all the worst things in the world, and they have the lawyer that's just trying to drop the charges for you, and they're talking about how Happy needs a good lawyer. You know what I mean? It was a scene that should have been more serious than it was in the movie, and I feel like they really missed an opportunity on that, especially because they barely showed him. And I understand it's not his movie, it's just a cameo. I understand this is their introduction to the MCU. Come on, I feel like they could have done a little bit more with him. Just shown him a little bit more. He would have called someone and it would have been him, or they would have said his name first and then introduced him. But no, they just brought him in and they just kicked him out. It was as simple as that. I do like the scene he was in though. He was very serious. He caught the flying object through the window, and then Tom Holland or Peter Parker was like, whoa. And he's like, I'm just a really good lawyer. I was like, damn, that was crazy. Fantastic guy, fantastic actor. I love the show, and I'm really glad he's in it. But then the pacing for that part was just really off. And then, boom, the charges were dropped, so all that stuff is just gone. So the only reason Peter Parker wants to get everyone to erase their memory of who Peter Parker is because he and his friends didn't get into college. Even Doctor Strange was like, are you kidding me? You can't just call the college and make him reconsider? Situation, I know, he makes mistakes, right? But this is his fourth mistake, Far From Home was a huge mistake, giving the glasses to Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio. And now this, where he's not going to call the college or try and rebuttal or say how he's not a murderer, especially when the charges were dropped to be accepted to their school. And then he immediately goes to Doctor Strange to do this spell, and then messes up the spell, and then I don't know, it was just really convoluted, confusing, honestly. I do like how Doctor Strange and Spider-Man had a fight. I do think, in my opinion, Doctor Strange should have won this fight, but of course I think due to plot purposes and Spider-Man being smart with math, and apparently you could just kind of trap him with all the webs and everything in the mirror dimension, the shattered dimension, because it shattered before that. It was weird. I think it was, for plot purposes, Spider-Man won. Of course, it makes sense, right? He kind of has to win for the movie to continue. But I feel like Doctor Strange was underused there, and I know he didn't want to hurt him. He didn't want to hurt a kid, especially Spider-Man. They've been through lots together through Endgame and Infinity War, so I kind of understand that. So then that's the first half of the movie, and then the second half for the pacing of the movie was fantastic. Once all three came in, or actually even before that, once all the bad guys came in and they all started kind of expressing their, their emotions and their motives for just being a villain. It was good. They were all bonding and talking to each other. They're all confused. They're all bringing up references to this first Spider-Man, second Spider-Man, third Spider-Man, to Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. You know, it was really well done how they're all talking to each other and bonding. I don't get how Electro isn't blue anymore. They didn't really explain that. Even he was kind of like, why am I not blue anymore? I know why. You know, they wanted to give him a huge makeover, but it didn't really make sense. And I still don't understand the plot hole. Probably look this up later or something about Electro knowing who Peter Parker is, because that's what the spell was, right? So the spell went wrong because all these people, all these villains that knew Peter Parker's identity as Spider-Man, of course, they were brought into this universe because they knew him. But Electro never knew who he was. But of course, I know there's probably someone explaining some multiverse plot hole about that. But that's what I'm saying. That's why with these movies like Multiverse and Timeline, like Endgame, where they manipulate like time and space, it's really confusing and it'll create a lot of plot holes at the end of the day. But people will still love the movie because of the fan performance it gives, because of all these characters they introduce and all these, like, you know, and then just these parts where it's really confusing in like timeline and plot and multiverse stuff is made up for the dialogue and the acting and the emotion and the fighting. You know, it's just everything's made up for it, but there's still those parts that I can't get out of my head. But once all the Spider-Man were all together, that part of that last section of the movie, the last half of the movie was fantastic. I feel like it was just really, really well done. I know the three Spider-Men were only there for the last 30 minutes, all of them together. I know they only had 30 minutes of screen time. I loved the dialogue every character in this movie had with each other. From Doctor Strange to Peter Parker to Tom Holland's Peter Parker, from Toby to Andrew to Tom Holland, just talking to each other was fantastic. It brought back so much emotion and nostalgia, and it was just a good moment for any Spider-Man fan, any Marvel fan, anyone who loves that type of stuff, you know? I thought it was really well done. It was fantastic. It was very grounded, you know? You look at these guys and they're like superheroes, right? They're the best of the best, but then they talk to each other and they're like, oh, you know, where did your web shooter come out of? Or like, oh man, I wish I had brothers. You know, it's just really grounded. You know, they're human, just like us, and they have emotions, and they have a face behind the mask. You know, and I thought it was fantastic, and it was really well done. The dialogue between all of the characters, between Green Goblin and Aunt May with Tom Holland, Peter Parker. I'm referring to their acting names because there's three Peter Parkers. I'm not trying to get everyone confused with my thoughts. From Green Goblin to Doc Ock, from Electro to Lizard to Sandman to Peter Parker. It was just a really well done dialogue. It was fantastic. I feel like for being such a dark movie, I know they advertised this movie to be really, really dark. The first half was not dark at all. In my opinion, I don't think it was dark at all, especially when they introduced the villains one by one. I feel like it was still really comedic, especially when they introduced the villains. They were making fun of them. You know, they made fun of Doc Ock. They made fun of Green Goblin being Green Elf, and I get it, you know, it's supposed to be a Marvel movie and they're comedic and Peter Parker's funny like that and everything, but I feel like for such a dark movie, it took way too long for it to actually become dark, and even the parts that were supposed to be dark weren't actually shown to be dark. I don't know if that makes sense, but I want to talk about Aunt May. Aunt May's death caught me off guard. It was a very, very sad death. I think it was really well done on both their parts, Tom Holland and Aunt May, of course, on their acting. I thought it was fantastic. I thought her death was really hard hitting on me, and he did a great job portraying the emotions throughout that scene. But I don't like how not dark it was. Like, realistically speaking, in Spider-Man 1, when the glider hit Green Goblin, it completely impaled him and stood him against the wall with his blood coming out of his mouth, you know, as he said his final words to Peter Parker. But then the same glider just comes straight from behind her at a really fast speed and just knocks her over. It doesn't even break her back, doesn't impale her, and she gets up like no problem. And not to mention, he threw a goblin bomb at them, which Peter failed to catch. I feel like she should have been more hurt. I know she died, okay? I know she died, but the way she died could have been a lot better. It could have been a lot darker. I understand that she had to get her last word out, but I don't like how she could have just got up and walked around and then kind of died. Like, there was no adrenaline kick that could have saved you from that, you know? I do like that she actually died, if that makes sense. I like that this Peter Parker now, Tom Holland, is experiencing a lot of mourning because Toby and Andrew have experienced a lot of mourning in their movies, and Tom Holland didn't experience much except for Tony Stark. Now, like, his life has completely changed around, and Aunt May's death really triggered him to become Spider-Man, I feel like. I feel like Aunt May's death triggered him to become the Peter Parker that we all love. The Peter Parker that, like, has his own apartment, listens to police scanners, and, like, saves the city from crime. I feel like that was a really pivotal part in this movie and really pivotal for like the future for him as Spider-Man. And I think it was really well done. You know, like I said, I wish it could have been darker, but honestly, it was well done. It was really hard hitting, and the emotions were just everywhere there. So I want to talk about the fighting. The fighting in the movie was fantastic. The CGI was overbearing at times, in my opinion. There were times where it was very obvious that the CGI was just really like there. But, I do have a habit of looking at characters' faces when they go through their CGI phase, and they're very blurry or they're very fake, or their actions are very like choppy, and you can definitely notice it. But not enough to ruin the movie or anything. The movie was great. The fighting was great. There's parts where I was like, damn, I could have been a lot better, But I want to talk about the fighting. The fighting was great, especially with the Doc Ock on the bridge scene. I love my favorite fight in the entire movie was the Green Goblin versus Peter Parker, Tom Holland's Peter Parker, when they were in the building, the apartment complex, and he's just like wrestling this man through walls and through each floor, just knocking him down. And then Tom Holland's Peter Parker did this like PS4 Spiderman move where he like flipped him around. It was so well done, and it showed how terrifying Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin was. It was crazy. Like his performance as Green Goblin was fantastic. I will compare it to the Joker. I don't care what anyone says. It was fantastic. If he got his own standalone movie, I know people would be saying the same exact thing, that he was a fantastic actor, and he's definitely, in my opinion, one of the best MCU villains we've seen. A lot of the MCU villains recently, especially in Phase 4, have been really lackluster, except for Shang-Chi, fantastic. But I feel like he did an amazing job as the villain for this movie, as a villain for this movie. That was the best fight in the entire movie for me. I feel like in the final battle, though, with the 3 Spider-Men against all 5 villains, the fight was way too short. I know you're probably saying this is like, what, you wanted more? I feel like it was way too short. I feel like even when they were getting beat up and even when they were losing at the beginning, they weren't getting hurt, really. Like, they were just kind of running around. They were getting hit, boom, boom, here, there. But then they were fine, Like, Tom Holland's Peter Parker was the man who took the most hits completely. And that wasn't even at that fight. That was by Green Goblin, like, an hour before, Like, and he got messed up by Doc Ock, like, an hour before that. Like, it's just, all 3 Spider-Men fighting in that scene was, like, really great to see, really, really hype. But none of them really got hurt. At the end of each Spider-Man, you definitely can tell that, like, especially, like, 1, 2, and 3, like, with their suits just being ripped and everything being, like, cut open and their masks being like destroyed, like you can definitely tell that they're struggling to fight one villain and that they're trying to learn everything. Of course, you can argue that they've already fought these villains before in the past, so they know how to really beat them in a situation like this. But there were 5 and there were 3 of them, and I know one of them was out, which is another point I want to talk about, which I'll pin that up here for a second after this part. I feel like their masks should have been cut more. I feel like all their suits were perfectly fine at the end of the day, especially when Toby got stabbed in the back. You couldn't even tell. Like, there was, like, when he got stabbed, like, no, there was nothing. There was nothing, There was nothing on Andrew's suit, like, where he got beat up or punched. Like, they weren't really losing. There wasn't really any risk of losing. Sorry, my monitors went out and I need that light. The only time they're at risk of losing is when Electro, had the Spider-Man unlock with his, like, arc reactor power, which I thought was fantastic. Man, it was OP during this movie. Jamie Foxx did amazing as Electro. But, like, even then, they weren't really, like, getting, like, it just, like, they just weren't getting hurt. I feel like they weren't getting hurt at all. Goes to my next point. I feel like Doc Ock should have been evil the entire time. I feel like at the end, he should have been brought good, and then that would have been, like, the game changer for them to win the fight. Because just the fact that, like, they were fighting Sandman, Lizard, and Electro, and then Doc Ock came in to just save them last second. Kind of just was like, what? That's it? That's the fight? Electro's OP right now, and Lizard didn't really do much, and Sandman. Another point I want to pin after this as well for Sandman and Lizard. But I feel like he was way too nice, way too early, I know in the first half of the movie, he's bad and he's trying to beat Peter Parker up and everything, but then he gets, like, easily outmaneuvered with the nanotechnology to take over his arms, and then he's like restricted the entire movie with his arms. But then, like, I feel like he should have had more scenes where he was fighting Peter Parker or any of the Spider-Men. That would have been like a game changer for them. But I think he was too good too early, in my opinion. But they should have saved it to the end fight to, like, make him good first, and then he would have helped them, But they did it like that, is how it is. And I think his performance as Doc Ock, Alfred Molina, really kicked it. Like, it was fantastic. But then again, and then I want to talk about the little side note. Let me grab that real quick. Sandman and Lizard were underused completely. I know their actors weren't able to come in due to scheduling issues and because of COVID restrictions, and I understand that. I'm not anything against those actors at all. I know the studio did their best to kind of include them in as much as they could, but they could have included them a little bit more, Sandman should have shown his power a lot more to beat these Spider-Man up, man. Like, he, you need to remember that in Spider-Man 3, he is just destroying Tobey Maguire, even with Venom's help. Like, he's just wrecking the floor with him, even before he got the black suit. Like, he's just wiping the floor with him. And you have to know that Lizard was wiping the floor with Andrew Garfield. Like, Andrew Garfield would have lost if it wasn't for Gwen Stacy's father during that scene. Now, a lot of people are going to watch this movie and they're going to look at Sandman and Lizard and think they're like really low tier villains, when in reality, they're pretty up there. You know, they're definitely up there. They're considered super villains, but they really underperform in this movie. I understand it's not the studio's fault. You know, the actors weren't really there. They can't really do much. There's already a lot of stuff going on to begin with, so you have to worry about that, which I understand. But just to me, I wish that they were used a bit more and they were shown to be more powerful and more serious. I do want to say I want Andrew Garfield in a lot more movies. There's a lot of you people out there I want to talk about. I have a gripe. I have a really big gripe. A lot of people hated Andrew Garfield just because of his movies and don't take into account how good he was as Spider-Man and Peter Parker. People would look at his movies and think he was just a really good Spider-Man, but a horrible Peter Parker because he was too attractive, too cool, too tall. When in reality, no one really watched the movies because he's definitely not like that at all in the movies. He's only like that when he has a suit on, and that's like all the Spider-Man, you know? When you put the mask on, you're definitely like not Peter Parker. You're Spider-Man, you know what I mean? Like you're more confident in the suit than you are outside of the suit. And there's a lot of scenes where Andrew Garfield was really awkward and really weird around Gwen Stacy specifically that proved him to be a really good Peter Parker. But a lot of people just kind of shut him down because the second movie wasn't even that good. That kind of disappointed me, how a lot of people are saying that he's the best Spider-Man now and how he should be given another chance, when in reality he should have been given another chance like 6 years ago, you know? But I'm really glad that people are starting to see it now, but it's kind of annoying how, like, you know, they needed another movie that had a slim chance of even happen, but it happened, and they brought him back in, and people are like, oh, we want the Amazing Spider-Man 3, which I want. I want it so badly. Andrew Garfield is my favorite Spider-Man. He's a fantastic actor, fantastic guy. And I teared up at the scene where he saved MJ. I feel like every single Spider-Man had their own past and their own burden they talked about, and a lot of them had a really good way of sharing their emotion with each other. And I thought that was fantastic in the movie. Man, that scene, that like, there were a lot of parallels in the movie that I found really great. A lot of parallels and a lot of references to the original movies, like the original Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, which I thought were fantastic. Like the Green Goblin scene where he breaks his mask and walks away off the alleyway is a direct parallel to Spider-Man 2, where Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man throws away his suit and walks away in the alleyway. And then, you know, the reference of him saying, I'm somewhat of a scientist myself. And then the reference to Miles Morales where Electro's talking to Andrew Garfield, where he's like, you know, I thought you were black and I wish there'd be a black Spider-Man. And he's like, yeah, maybe out there, you know, just references like that. The parallels and the references to the original movies were really well done, especially how the villains talk to each other. They're like, you died. And he's like, you try to make the place into lizards. And he's like, you were a loser back then. You know, it was really good. I really liked it a lot. I do want to talk about the end credit scene, not the second one. The second one was the Multiverse of Madness trailer, which I'm really excited about. And the amount of rumors and leaks that I'm hearing about this movie that I want to talk about in the next few days is fantastic. It's crazy what they're talking about. Even more to beat No Way Home. It's kind of crazy. But I want to talk about the first one. It's very convoluted how they're dealing with the Venom situation. I know Sony is really into the cash grab, honestly, and they're keeping the Sonyverse intact, which is why people are asking for the Amazing Spider-Man 3, because they want Andrew to go against Venom in the next movie, if that ever happens, because they're keeping the Sonyverse separate from the MCU, because he gets pulled back into his reality because of the spell that Peter Parker was, you know, that they made to make everyone forget he's Peter Parker. But the fact that he left that little bit of a symbiote, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Does that mean Tom Holland's going to get the symbiote next movie and he's going to become Venom with the black suit? Or does that mean there's another Eddie Brock in this universe that is going to get this new symbiote? Which I'm kind of disappointed about. If there's another Eddie Brock in this movie, I'm going to be really sad, because I love Tom Hardy. I love Tom Hardy as an actor, and I love him as Venom. You know, even his movies aren't that good, I do think he's a fantastic actor and fantastic choice for the role. And the fact that he's not going to be the Venom for the MCU kind of just, he's got, you know, a bullet to the heart. But we're going to have to see how they deal with it. I'm not going to do any theories with that because I really have no idea on that. I do want to talk about the ending real quick. I talked about the credit scene before I talked about the ending, but the ending was actually so heartbreaking. It was so well done. The fact that they all hugged each other at the end, all three Peter Parkers, was everything any fan would have asked for. Like, just them being in the movie, them talking to each other about their past and their future and their present and what they're dealing with, their powers and their suits, and just the fact that they hugged at the end, just really was a tearjerker, you know? It was really well done. And I loved how Tom Holland's Peter Parker, even after seeing Tobey get stabbed, losing Aunt May, he still saves Green Goblin at the end of the day, because that's what it means to be Spider-Man, you know? That was really well done. I do like that a lot. And I do like how he finally made that huge sacrifice where everyone has to forget about him completely for the whole world to now just break into a multiverse reality shatter thing. I like the references they put up in the sky, you know, with the multiverse, like Kraven, Rhino, and Scorpion. That was really cool too. I do like that he made that choice. I'm wondering though if that affects also all the villains that were transported back to their world. You know, I know they're transported back to their world and they're all cured now, which does that mean they are going to forget Tom Holland's Peter Parker? Does that mean Toby and Andrew are going to forget about Tom Holland's Peter Parker? I have no idea how it works. I'm still trying to wrap it around my head. But I still think it was a really honorable thing, and it's a really Spider-Man thing to do, you know, at the end of the day, that he did that for the greater good of everyone, you know, even if that means he's going to be by himself, and he's gonna lose the last thing he had to love, which was MJ, and even his best friend Ned, right? And I do love how he had everything planned to go, you know, be friends with them again, and then go talk to them again. And then, you know, he made the choice to not talk to them, and that was just heartbreaking, you know, and it was definitely another thing where it showed him that he's ready to be Spider-Man finally, you know. A lot of people complained about how this Spider-Man didn't have his own origin, he's just Tony Stark Jr., but the way I'm looking at it is I feel like all these 3 movies were his origin story. I feel like Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home were his origin story, and the next 3 movies that are his are going to be his Spider-Man movies. But these 3 movies were his origin story, and I look at it like that, and I accept it, and I love it. I also want to talk about that homemade suit he made at the end. That was fantastic. I just bought this suit, the Far From Home suit, and I gotta buy this new homemade suit because it's definitely already my favorite, if I'm being honest here. Amazing Spider-Man suit was my favorite, and this one came out, and this was my favorite. This one might top both, just mainly because of the fact that it has both Toby and Andrew symbol on it, apparently, and it's like a metallic blue and like a light red, just like the comics are, and it's definitely a callback to Spider-Man for PS4, which is a freaking amazing game. I recommend everyone to play it. It's an amazing game. That was like my favorite Spider-Man Peter Parker ever until now. But no, I do think it was a really well done ending and a good callback to that game, and I do like just how he's by himself now, you know, and it's really sad. It's really sad. It's really heartbreaking that he's by himself, right? Like he has no one now, but I do think it was a great start for the beginning of his new movies, because this was his Homecoming origin story, and now he's Spider-Man. You know, he's made his own suit, you know, and the possibilities are limitless now. But I still think this movie was really well done on a lot of aspects, you know. So I do want to give it a 9 out of 10. Even with the convoluted and the rush parts, there were just way too much to put in this movie that would, you know, even affect my score. Even if this movie was 3 hours long, I would think the movie would be a little bit too long. I don't really care about the length of a movie unless it explains a lot of its points. This movie didn't really explain a lot of its points, which is why I'm not giving it a 10 out of 10. And, you know, there were a lot of gripes that I had earlier that I talked about. I do want to give it a 9 out of 10. I think the humor was really funny in a lot of parts, especially when all 3 were talking, all 3 Peter Parkers. I think the emotions that everyone had in this movie was fantastic. The dialogue was incredible with everyone. I don't even want to get started on that. The suits were amazing. I love how all 3 had their unique suits. This is so well done. But of course, I think it was rushed. You know, a lot of stuff was overlooked. The battle was not, you know, really a final battle. In my opinion, it was very cut short, very, very easy. There was too much humor in some parts where there shouldn't have been, you know, and then the convoluted stuff that I already said, it's confusing at some points with the plot holes and everything. But I want to give it a 9 out of 10. That is my final rank for it. Maybe in a year, look back at it and be like, wow, this is a 10 out of 10. You know, after they explained a few more things, or I watched some more theory videos or something like that. Or maybe I'll drop it to an 8 out of 10. Who knows? I don't know. It's a very fantastic movie, and I want to talk about, real quick before I end this, I want to talk about my predictions for Spider-Man 4. Now, I take full credit for this. I thought about this by myself. I was thinking for hours on end on what the next movie was going to be about, and I still think, since if you haven't watched Hawkeye, I recommend you don't listen to this last part, but if you have watched Hawkeye, then listen up. With the introduction of Kingpin to Hawkeye and the introduction to Daredevil in the MCU and No Way Home, I think this is a perfect, oh, and also the fact that Spider-Man is swinging across the ice rink that's present in the last episode of Hawkeye for, you know, episode 6. I think there's too many connections here that you can't miss. Like, you just can't miss this. I think Spider-Man 4 is going to be about Kingpin being the big boss coming in, and Spider-Man, you know, Tom Holland Spider-Man having to fight him, and then Black Cat gets introduced somehow in this movie, but then Daredevil might come in to, you know, back him up, like a team-up movie. I don't know. I do think Spider-Man 4 is going to be with Kingpin, Black Cat, and Tom Holland, Peter Parker. I do think it's going to be like that, and if they ever make an Amazing Spider-Man 3, which I don't know if it'll happen or not, it's definitely going to be with you know, the likes of Morbius and Venom and Andrew Garfield with Peter Parker. Those are my theories for the fourth movie for Spider-Man. I don't know if we agree with that. I know a lot of people probably won't agree with that. If you agree with it, let me know in the comments, because honestly, yeah, I think that's like the best play they're gonna do, especially with Kingpin being such a like big villain in the MCU, especially a Spider-Man and a Daredevil villain, which are two characters that are completely in their prime right now. You know, I do think that's where they're going to take the MCU next for Spider-Man 4. I know a lot of people are saying that the symbiote's going to be coming in and Secret Wars this. I don't think they're going to do Secret Wars. It kind of makes no sense right now in the timeline, in my opinion. How they're all forced to fight in a battle, and then he gets his black suit. Or I don't really vibe with that. I vibe with my theory. They're probably gonna not do the symbiote thing for a while after, you know, until after Spider-Man 4 is done. They're probably gonna introduce it at the end of Spider-Man 4, but I don't think it's gonna be anytime soon, in my opinion. I might be stupid. I might call back to this. I might do my review for Spider-Man 4 in like 3 years or something, and then be like, wow, I really deserve to just stop talking in this video. But that's where I have it right now. I do love this movie. I do want to watch it like 6 more times. I just can't get that picture of the three of them hugging out of my head, and it's such a good movie. I felt like a kid the entire time. Yeah, so that was my review for Spider-Man No Way Home. I'm out of breath. I spoke so fast, and I'm so sorry if I spoke really fast for you to not understand, but I just got really excited to talk about it. And if you watch all the way to the end, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you. I do put a lot of work into these videos, even if it doesn't seem like it, but I really appreciate you for watching. I really appreciate you for taking the time to even like click on my video. But if you did watch all the way here, or if you just skipped to the end to see what my review was, I still appreciate you. And yeah, that was my review for Spider-Man No Way Home. I thank you guys for watching, and I guess I will be making another video in the next few days. I don't know what about just yet, but when I make it, I'll let you guys know. You guys have a great night, and thank you for watching.